What's up, Bulls Nation? It's the Bloody Horns podcast. I'm your host, Justin. Let's get into this daily content, man. So the biggest question for the Chicago Bulls this offseason is, what do we do with Patrick Williams? There's a lot of options, right? And there's a lot of people out there who are saying we can't lose Patrick Williams. If we lose Patrick Williams, some team is going to unlock him, just like the Jazz unlocked Lauri Markkanen. This narrative drives me crazy, guys. One, Patrick Williams hasn't done half of what Lauri Markkanen did in a Chicago Bulls uniform. Every year Lauri Markkanen was here, he was averaging double digits. He had a couple years where he was near 20 points a game. Like, the dude produced. Health was Lauri Markkanen's biggest problem in Chicago. When he was kind of coming into his own in his second year, he looked like he was really going to be something special for the Chicago Bulls. After that, the injuries hit, and he was never really able to get back on track. By the time he came back, his fourth year here, Billy Donovan was in place, and it just never really worked out for him. So it's a terrible comparison because Patrick Williams has never really produced the way that Lauri Markkanen did. When people say Patrick Williams has had flashes, his flashes have been like 3-game stretches, and then you'll have 2 absolute duds of a game, and then you'll have 2 good games, and people will talk about flashes. And keep in mind, his flash is like a 15-point game, and people are like, see, this is what we've been waiting for. So I'm not against bringing Patrick Williams back, but I don't view it as catastrophic as some other people do. In fact, I'd go as far as to say I wouldn't extend him this offseason. I'd bring him back on the qualifying offer. I have no interest in committing 4 to 5 years to Patrick Williams. He still has a lot to prove to me. But one of the things that this does is it brings out the revisionist history side of a lot of Bulls fans, where they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we let Lauri Markkanen go. How did we not see this? And like I said, man, he could not stay healthy here. And his last year here, he was totally lost. His last year here was his worst year as a pro. I think his numbers the next year in Cleveland were down slightly, but he was much more efficient as a player. Where his last year here in Chicago, he wasn't efficient at all. His shooting percentages were in the toilet. His body language was terrible. He was playing absolutely no defense. Not that he really plays any now. He wasn't rebounding. He was out of position. Like, his time in Chicago, it had to come to an end, guys. There was never going to be a happy ending for Lauri Markkanen in Chicago. It just wasn't going to happen. There's a reason that all he was getting from the Bulls was that qualifying offer. They weren't trying to negotiate with him long-term that offseason. They were just going to give him that qualifying offer. He was a restricted free agent that offseason. There's a reason there was nobody else who was interested in him. People look back at that trade, and they're like, how did we only get Derrick Jones Jr. and a protected Portland pick for Lauri Markkanen when he's averaging like 25 a game on the Jazz now? Well, his services weren't in demand. There weren't people bidding for him. Nobody else was trying to sign him to an offer sheet. Cleveland was the only team that came through. If Cleveland hadn't came through, Patrick Williams would have been forced to sign that qualifying offer and play the year in Chicago. Who knows how that would have turned out? You know, his attitude was pretty bad. He had multiple interviews where he said he wasn't interested in being a Bull anymore. He wanted a fresh start. So who knows how that would have played out? But Cleveland was literally his only suitor. And the contract they gave him, it wasn't crazy by any means. It's a bargain contract. Now, at the time, a lot of people were looking at it like, wow, I can't believe you're going to commit that kind of money to Lauri Markkanen. But you even look at his next year in Cleveland, he didn't do shit. He really didn't do shit. He was like their 4th option. Once again, they didn't really know what to do with him. They didn't really know where to play him, what he was going to do. There was an overlap with Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen. Nobody in Cleveland thought this dude was going to be an all-star. The Utah Jazz did not think this dude was going to be an all-star. When they traded for him, he was literally just a throw-in to make salaries match. It's not like they called the Cavs and they were like, we absolutely have to have Lauri Markkanen. That's not what happened. They got lucky. Lauri Markkanen literally needed a situation like Utah where he was given the ultimate green light, where they told him, we're going to run the offense through you, take whatever shots you want, do whatever you want. There's no accountability here. We're not even trying to win basketball games. Just put up stats. And that's my thing with Lauri Markkanen right now is, yes, he's good, but are we sure he's that good? Like, yeah, his numbers look good. The Jazz haven't done shit. They haven't made the playoffs with him. Lauri Markkanen has literally never played in an NBA playoff game. He didn't make it with the Bulls. The Cavs made the play-in game, but they didn't make the playoffs that year. He's never played in a playoff game, guys. He's never played in a game that fucking matters. So, yeah, he puts up a lot of stats, but we get into what? What's this year going to be? Year 7 or year 8 for him? we're still not sure if this dude's actually an impact player who affects winning in any way. So that's my thing with the Lauri Markkanen thing. And when people talk about the return too, you got to keep in mind that Portland pick at the time, it certainly seemed like it was going to convey. Like it was what, top 10 protected, I think. And we all assumed that Portland would finish outside of the top 10 because they had Damian Lillard, because they had been going for the playoffs for the last 6-7 years prior with Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard got hurt that year. He got hurt, kind of took Portland out of the running. The next year, I think he was hurt again that next year. And then last year, they just decided to tank that year away. So Portland, it's just a misfortune thing. Like, when we traded for that pick, we figured it was going to convey that year. And then Dame gets hurt, and it totally changes the trajectory of that team. Totally changes, their plan going forward. They went from really trying to go for it to make the playoffs, even as a 6, 7, or 8 seed, to just being content to tank and let Dame put up stats. So the Lauri Markkanen revisionist history of the Chicago Bulls, it always drives me crazy, guys. I promise you there was no happy ending coming for Lauri Markkanen in Chicago. He was never going to be what he is in Utah here in Chicago. It just wasn't going to happen. There's no Batman and Robin with him and Zach LaVine. There's no dynamic 1-2 punch. We saw 3 years of that shit, and we probably saw the peak of what that was going to be. Those two, their games just weren't meant to grow together. So with Patrick Williams' free agency coming up, he's a restricted free agent. I'm not going to be shocked if we lose him, and then I got to deal with a bunch of Bulls fans when he averages like 10 points a game next year being like, oh my God, I can't believe we let him go. When in reality, man, I think it might just be Patrick Williams' time to go. He's had 4 years here. He's had 4 years to prove himself. Dude hasn't really been able to prove anything. But let me know what you think in the comments, how you feel about Lauri Markkanen, how you feel about Patrick Williams. I'm just sick of the revisionist history, man.